Once upon a time, in the village of Arugba lived Jimi. Jimi is a great palm wine tapper. His wine is greatly loved by the villagers of Arugba because of its richness in taste and texture. Jimi is married to Fola, a beautiful basket weaver. They both have two daughters. His family seemed happy and perfect. However, Jimi is an unfaithful lying husband. His wife, Fola, trusts him wholeheartedly. Unknown to her, Jimi is a wolf in sheep clothing. Jimi has perfected the art of deception that even his wife would gladly lay down her life in his defense. She suspected nothing as she lived happily in a bubble of happiness being sold to her. As a wine tapper, Jimi's absence for days is not uncommon. He usually goes deep into the forest in search of the palm trees to tap his palm wine. Oftentimes, he will be gone for a week or more. Jimi was very careful and thoughtful. He is also very thorough with his unfaithfulness. He picks his mistress from other villages. This was his well-devised plan to live his double life peacefully and avoid being caught. He never discloses his actual place of abode. Jimi is a smart talker. He has a way of making people listen to him. It really never happened for someone to meet Jimi and not like him because he is calculative and a master manipulator. He will say the right things you want to hear just to get close to you. Not only does Jimi has a mistress in a neighboring village, he has also been visiting Tade in Remo village, who is presently with his child. Jimi had promised Tade marriage when they had started dating about 2 years ago. He had informed Tade about a non-existent family taboo, that it is forbidden in his family to marry a woman who has not given birth to his child, preferably a male child. He went as far as saying if he dared ignore the taboo, he would die instantly. Neither Tade nor her family were aware that Jimi has a whole family living in Aruba. Jimi's very excuse for his constant absence is usually understandable by his women due to his line of work. One fateful day, Jimi set out on his bicycle to the forest. Fola packed some akara with sweet potatoes wrapped in banana leaves for Jimi. She wished him good luck and prayed for his safety back. Jimi asked his wife if he should stay back and postpone his trip. However, Fola disagreed. She encouraged him to go and rush back home as he had almost run out of palm wine. Jimi left without much persuasion. After a couple of miles journey, Jimi dumped the food his wife had packed for him into the forest. He steered his bicycle towards Tade's village, where he was being expected and served hot pounded yam with egusi soup. Tade informed Jimi about her due date, which is a couple of weeks away. Jimi promised to be by her side through it all. He spent 5 days with Tade. During his time with her, they visited the midwives together. On the 6th day, Jimi finally left Rebo village. He arrived at the forest where he spent another 3 days before heading home to his wife and daughters. Fola was very happy to have him back. She hurriedly instructed her eldest daughter to arrange some water for his bath while she prepared his dinner. Jimi came up with stories about how difficult his journey had been. He knew Fola enjoyed listening to his stories. 2 weeks later, exactly a day after Tade's due date, Jimi left for Remo village. However, he didn't go directly to Tade's house. He looked around purposefully to get information about the sex of the child. After a couple of hours, he overheard two women talking. Apparently, they were coming from Tade's house. He found out that Tade had given birth to a baby girl. Jimi stomped angrily into the forest where he had hid his bicycle. He said, "What a waste of time. What does she expect me to do with another daughter when I already have two at home? Ha! My mind never mislead me, oh. I should have known better by the shape of her feet that she won't be able to birth male children. What's my own? She should go and take care of it by herself. May we never cross paths again." Jimi hurriedly left Remo. Jimi was consumed with disappointment that he went straight back home. His wife, Fola, noticed that he had not brought any palm wine with him, and his mood was different. She inquired about his sudden return. However, Jimi lied that he had caught a fever. Few months later, Jimi began visiting Agor village frequently. After a couple of trips, he set his sights on a young woman called Bintu. Jimi chose Bintu mainly because she's an orphan. He was certain if things didn't go according to his plan, he could easily make an exit without any drama. One day, Jimi approached Bintu's food shed. After a while, he asked Bintu for the direction to the market as an opening to get her talking. Jimi talked his way into Bintu's personal life. Few minutes later, she opened up about her ex-husband who had faked his own death after stealing almost all of her inheritance. Jimi held her hands and said all the right words. He asked if it was okay if he could check on her from time to time. Bintu was more than happy to have Jimi as her new companion. After a few visits, Jimi convinced Bintu about his undying love to marry her. Bintu gladly obliged. However, she warned Jimi that she can be very possessive, and secondly, that her heart is not to be played with. Jimi assured her that she had nothing to worry about when it comes to him. Within few months, Bintu got hooked on Jimi. Jimi sold her the same lies he had sold Tade. Bintu was skeptical about the idea. However, Jimi promised her that she is everything he had hoped for in a wife. When Bintu got pregnant, she was over the moon. She finally felt a prayer to have a family is happening for her. Jimi informed her that he would be more than happy if she had a baby boy. Bintu said she does not care about the sex of the baby as long as the baby is healthy. Few months later, Bintu water broke during one of Jimi's visits. The baby decided to come 2 weeks earlier. Jimi rushed Bintu to the midwife's house. 2 hours later, Bintu put to bed. Unfortunately for Jimi, Bintu gave birth to a baby girl. Jimi began fuming with disappointment when the midwife handed him the baby. He felt suffocated and refused to touch the baby. He excused himself from the room. As soon as they stepped out of the room, Jimi took to his heels and never looked back. When Jimi didn't show up after a while, Bintu began to panic. Minutes turned to hours. Still, Jimi was nowhere to be found. Jimi went back to his family like nothing has happened. He continued his waywardness until a few months later when Bintu arrived at his home. Bintu and Fola greeted each other. Bintu asked about Jimi's whereabouts. Fola informed her that Jimi had traveled a day prior to the forest. Bintu also asked when Jimmy would be coming back because she had ordered some fresh palm wine from him. When Bintu got back to Ago, she was furious with herself for falling for Jimmy's lies. So he has a whole family. Still, he found his way to fool her. Perhaps I'm not the only one he had done this to. Bintu kept pondering on the possibility. She decided to take matters into her hands. She began to visit the villages one after the other. She was more devastated by what she had discovered. The following week, Bintu arrived at Jimmy's house. Luckily, she found him at the entrance of his home. He could not comprehend how Bintu was able to locate him. He was very careful about his dealing. How on earth did she find me? He thought. Bintu said, Jimmy, you know you are an animal in a human form. You have no conscience or integrity. How could you? How could you abandon me and my daughter? Jimmy calmly said, Bintu, please lower your voice. The neighbors will hear you. Bintu responded, does it look like I care? Jimmy tried to cover her mouth. However, Bintu bites his fingers angrily. She said, how dare you lay your filthy hands on me, you these goats? Jimmy begged her. He said, I'm sorry, but this is not the place for this conversation. You know what? Go back home. I will meet you there. Bintu laughed. You think I'm stupid, right? That I will still fall for your lies. Try again next time, but not today, Jimmy. I would rather trust the words of a venomous snake than a piece of garbage like you. Everyone will know what you have been hiding all along. Are you scared your wife will find out the truth? Jimmy suddenly pushed Bintu. She fell and hit her head on a grinding stone. Jimmy announced, please stand up. I did not mean to push you. He tried to lift Bintu up, but he discovered that Bintu had stopped breathing. Jimmy quietly cried and said, Bintu, please stand up. I'm so sorry. Please wake up. After a minute or two, Bintu's daughter began to make uneasy noise. Jimmy had to think fast because his wife would be back home soon. He carried Bintu's body into a basket with her daughter in a sack. He hopped on his bicycle and made his way towards the forest, where he dumped her body and her daughter's right beside her. The baby began crying again. Jimmy never cared for her, so it was easy for him to abandon her and didn't bother to look back. Jimmy hurriedly made his way back home. Unknown to him, Bintu was not dead. She had only lost consciousness for some time. Bintu found herself in the forest later that evening with her poor daughter who had fallen very ill. Bintu made her way hurriedly back to Agor where she nursed her daughter. A month later, Bintu, Tade, and the other woman made their way to Jimmy's house. Unfortunately for him, Fola was around too. Jimmy and Fola were both sitting at the backyard when they heard a knock at the door. Fola made her way outside. When she found three women asking for her husband, she instantly recognized Bintu. She called on Jimmy. When he got to the entrance of the hut, he sighted his three mistresses. He was in disbelief. He began to cough really hard. Tade said, please stop with the theatrics, Jimmy. So you are alive and well. You have been in Aruba village all this while. Yet, I was worried something had happened to you. Fola interrupted her. She said, sorry, do you know my husband? Bintu, Sade, and the other woman replied, yes, we do. Sade added, he is our daughter's father. He abandoned us after we gave birth. Fola laughed. How is that possible? He is my husband. When and how did all this happen? Bintu interrupted her. I am sure you remember my face. Your so-called husband is the father of my daughters too. I came to confront him the other day when I met you. And did you know that this excuse of a man pushed me on the ground? I lost consciousness and he dumped me in the forest, thinking I was dead. The sad part was that he even abandoned my 9-month-old daughter in the forest too. Fola responded, "That's not true. Jimmy would never do that to anyone. He can never hurt a fly." Bintu quickly interjected, "If I was lying, why didn't Jimmy defend himself? Are you sure you know him well enough?" Jimmy just stood there, shaking his head and legs. Both Tade and the other women narrated their experiences to Fola as well. "How could you treat people like trash? You have daughters too, you know. How would you feel if a man did the same thing to them?" Jimmy refused to respond. He just stared at the ground. Fola continued, "I don't think I have ever met the real Jimmy. Our life has been nothing but a big lie. Jimmy, tell me it's a lie. Tell me these women are lying on you. Jimmy, please say something." Fola jumped up and slapped Jimmy hard on his cheek. Jimmy suddenly screamed, "So what? Yes, I impregnated them. But it was never my intention. You Jezebels are quick to point fingers. If you, Fola, had given me a male child, none of this would have happened." Fola was dumbfounded. She said, "What?" Jimmy replied, "Don't act dumb. I wanted a son. None of you useless women could even successfully grant me that. Blame yourselves for being failures, incompetent women. Ordinary baby boy they cannot handle. Fola, if you have an issue, you can leave for your father's house now. And you, Tade, and this other one, leave my house now before I throw you all out." They all began screaming at once at him. Suddenly, Bintu started hitting Jimmy with a broom. The other three women joined in. They beat Jimmy mercilessly. Jimmy was dragged out of the house and he was continuously flogged by his wife and the women through the village. Jimmy was publicly disgraced and humiliated. He was later released. The shame was too much for him to bear. He was gravely mocked and avoided by the villagers. The humiliation was unbearable for him. He left Aruba with his bicycle and was never seen again. Fola reached out to the three other women some weeks after the incident. The four women forged a bond. Their friendship grew stronger. They relied on each other for emotional support, especially Bintu, who had no family. Oftentimes, they laughed at each other when one of them brings up Jimmy and how they had met. Fola was happy to raise her daughters far away from Jimmy's toxicity. She stayed present in the other women's life and they continued to support one another. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next episode. The end. Ó dàbọ̀.